Yeah, they say that's not their intention, but everything feels like that's their intention.
Well,
So,
a few times I wouldn't let
but
it be.
yeah,
You know,
last
they're
summer,
their job,
that's really
right?
great.
You'd be a
And,
good
the
facilitator. He did
especially
not like
I
part
was.
of class is really fun. Just like our insight on urban design, and we have our big project due in like 3 weeks. That's starting to ramp up a little bit. We're redesigning a section of Bend. There's an old
I
Costco,
have a nasty cough. Hopefully it will.
building a walkable
Side,
community.
but if it does, I'm gonna run out the door.
Yeah,
Is it, you just have to work on maps and work and stuff?
so we did visit the site once.
Oh.
Yeah, and we walked the site with
If you want this chair, I'll move over one.
planners from the city of Bend.
Okay.
And then a lot of it
Yeah.
is Google Earth.
Your jacket that
Like kind of
perfectly
thing.
matches
Oh, hey, yeah,
the
sorry, I
back of
forgot
the
all
chair.
that, because I should have done that, just switch chairs, right? Currently just
You know,
A massive
things of that.
parking lot, like the Costco,
Any got.
Safeway, yeah.
How are you?
Good.
Hey, Josh.
So,
How are you?
yeah.
Yes,
it's kind of
how are
like a street network and This year?
You were in Green last year.
Which is here?
Yeah. I was-
It's just really tricky. It would be like building
Yeah, it's pretty
a nice walkable neighborhood along that. So it's like
So much to do over
not
there.
much
Yeah.
to start. Yeah,
I'm happy to do that.
but
Yeah, demo.
nice thing of it, in all this parking lot,
Happy
gives
to
you, like the ultimate freedom.
Get some PR
And you
to
can,
knock
yeah, you
here.
can play God a lot with it,
Yeah.
as opposed to when you're dealing with the constraints of something.
Get you ready to redesign.
Oh, I-
Belarus.
Yeah,
Is that right?
that's true. Yeah. It's, I mean, even if not the center itself, at least a lot of the parking lots are
Yeah.
never used.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially on the river. Like,
What's that?
Not parking.
So, I was trying to have it, I don't.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Body figure
Yeah.
tax.
There's all the maps on
Yeah.
that. I couldn't really tell you.
Yeah,
So tell
but
me
then-
where. what
Between
you-
all the beaches and meetings,
I only figured out my.
we can't really.
Last one.
Oh, is it? I think.
What's the best way?
Sure, you can get, you can get, you can get in,
Oh, yeah. Right. Intersection.
Okay, and maybe you're gonna talk about this when you talk.
Good evening.
Yeah.
I think it's time to get started. So welcome to the November meeting of the APC. And, I'll frankly go for Willa to do your little spiel.
My spiel, oh, that's wrong paper, spiel paper. Good evening, everyone. My name is Willow and I'm the City of Eugene staff representative for this meeting. Before the chairs convene the meeting, I have a few reminders and introductory words. I would like to begin by acknowledging that tonight's meeting is being held on Kalapuya Alihi, the traditional indigenous homelands of the Kalapuya people, whom continue to make contributions to their communities here and across the land we now refer to as Oregon. The purpose of the Active Transportation Committee is to advise the City of Eugene staff and community organizations and partners on the implementation of Eugene's pedestrian and bicycle strategic plan, to represent community and constituent interests in transportation planning decisions, and to provide feedback to staff on projects related to walking and biking. Eugene City staff will consider recommendations from the ATC along with input from other members of the public during decision-making processes. Please keep in mind that this meeting is being both recorded and live streamed to YouTube, meaning that it can be viewed on the City of Eugene YouTube channel both right now and in the future. All verbal and written commentary will be held in the public record. Today's meeting begins with a 15-minute public comment period. The public comment period is an opportunity for individuals to speak to the Active Transportation Committee on transportation-related issues. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak. When it is your time, please give your name, city of residence, and if you live in Eugene, your neighborhood or ward. We'll begin with those who are joining us online. So if you're online and you'd like to speak, you can use the raise hand feature in Zoom, and I'll call on you if they have. It doesn't look like we have anybody who wants to speak from online. So we will move to those of us in person. And it looks like we have just one person who wants to give public comment. And that's Dan.
Yes, am I in range of the microphones and camera?
Yeah, if you could come just stand up in front, that'd be great. Thank
Okay,
you.
I'm afraid I have not really got a friendly comment for this committee. My name is Dan Poliu. I am a commuting cyclist. I've been for 35 years since I first moved here I ride everywhere, including out of town. I know how to ride safely in traffic. Last Sunday, I collided with a truck that made a sudden right turn in front of me while I approached in one of the new two-way bike lanes. That lane was on my left and on the driver's right. While I believe the driver was at fault, I blame the city more for directing bicycle traffic to cross the truck's path from an unexpected direction. If I had been a few feet further forward before the truck moved, I would have been T-boned and I might have possibly been killed. I believe that as long as these new designs persist, that is bound to happen to a cyclist sooner or later. With all the new traffic hazards created by misguided and ignorant activism. When it does happen, I will be sure that any litigating plaintiff knows of my comments here tonight. Bike lanes go on the right side of the road, moving in the same direction as adjacent lanes. That best ensures that motorists and cyclists can see each other and know what to expect from each other. It minimizes the number of times they must cross paths, and it minimizes the potential collision speed. As some of us doubtless know in this room, high fatality risk starts at about 20 miles per hour. The new two-way bike routes on the city's one-way streets are a disaster. They create countless new right-of-way conflicts, which make these streets both slower and less safe. Both cyclists and motorists alike are confused. That is dangerous. Half of the city's motorists still try to yield on Willamette Street to cyclists waiting at the two-way stop signs on 15th Street. So it is naive to expect them to handle harder puzzles. For example, the one that now exists at 15th and High. Not every motorist on 15th going east or westbound will expect southbound bike traffic on High Street, no matter how many signs you show them to contradict the one-way sign telling them that motor vehicle traffic is northbound. The more information you give them on short notice, the less likely they are to understand it all. Who wanted this? Nobody needs to ride south on High Street. They can use Pearl or Mill. It's easy. Our streets will never be safe until the city stops confusing people by trying to fix what ain't broke. Give us back our one-way streets and our right-hand bike lanes that the whole world knows and understands. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Whoa. Wow, what an exit. That got louder and louder as it went.
I guess we can't really respond.
I can't respond. Yes.
It's okay.
Betty in the back heard.
It wasn't clear where that took place.
I presume High Street.
Sounded like High Street, but
And
yeah.
High Street, I think it was High Street and it was clearly, it was going southbound.
Yeah.
And it
Yes.
and I presume it wasn't at one of the signalized intersections.
Doesn't seem like.
Right,
Right.
So maybe.
I was
after
turning
that-
right.
Who
Yeah.
who just narrowed it, most of them have signals.
He's probably referring to 15th and High.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, I feel sad that he got in a collision with
Yeah.
the truck. That's too bad. He obviously is upset about that happening, which is reasonable.
Yeah,
We'll say I know of him and he sounds, his voice is a little like that anyway.
Mhm,
So
upset. Oh, did you say you know him already?
I don't know him well. I've heard his voice. We've
You've met before.
You know, we're part of another group, but I don't know if we've
Gotcha.
actually met. in
Okay.
person, but
Gotcha.
we both do radio shows on KUCW, not together.
Well,
The point is, I've heard his voice many times and it's. a little
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay.
Reed, did you have something to say?
So there's a couple interventions on High Street specifically that are a little bit different than what we've done on the other two ways. One of them is that we put all the two-way bikeway warning signs, the high-vis yellow-green warning signs are on the near side of the intersection. We think that was a mistake. They're gonna go on the far side, so that people can see them when they're facing straight ahead, so that they will be reminded to look left and right. I have made that request to our signs and markings folks so that they can move those. The other thing is that we've recently taken out a bunch of bollards, and that is specifically so that we can get our sweepers in there. Especially now during leaf season where everything is full of water, including that lane, which the southbound lane was underwater for most of the week. And so, and I think for folks who don't know, we didn't just one day decide to do High Street. High Street was part of a vision process to connect the Ridgeline trail system to the Riverbank Path system, and it has been envisioned for about 2 decades. And the reason you would do a two-way there is that High Street is the only street that connects South Eugene all the way to the river. None of the other ones do that. So that's some of the genesis behind it. We're aware of a couple issues. We also expect people to pay attention, and I think that's been lacking, and I don't know how to make people care more when they're behind the wheel about other users. I was telling folks on the way in, I had somebody turn across me when I was in the bikeway on 13th, even though there was a bright no turn on left on red sign in front of the driver, they just did it anyway. So until we can get the enforcement aspect of this linked, I think we're gonna see stuff like this, and I just encourage people to just ride vigilant.
It's difficult because it's intended for people who are less experienced riders and we're not gonna have the
I know.
instincts to check behind them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, I've also witnessed a crash on High Street of someone, of a car turning across the two-way bike lane into a parking lot and hit a scooterer. Yeah, has there been, I'm sure planning staff have thought about this, but I know in a lot of other countries, the pavement is a different color in bike lanes in order to signal that, hey, this space is for something else. I'm guessing you guys have thought of that. Is there a reason why that's not?
I could talk a long time about this, but
Yeah.
one thing,
I'm sure.
asphalt in other countries comes in like more of a clear color, and then they're able to tint it.
Yeah,
The United States doesn't get that product, and we've been
I see.
hoping that since people have started doing bikeways, that would make its way here, but it hasn't. So we'd have to put something over the top, like thermoplastic or something else, that's really expensive.
and slippery.
And the other thing on High Street specifically is that whole street needs to be redeveloped, or I should say repaired. And so really, reason we did like paint and plastic there is because, and there's no concrete like there's like on 13th or on 8th, is because that street is not in good shape.
Yeah.
So this is really meant to be sort of a temporary thing. And so when it goes back in a more permanent condition, maybe we should have the conversation about colorants at that point.
Yeah, thanks.
Let's hear from.
Okay, this
Travis.
isn't really planned as a
Right,
discussion.
Yeah.
but we do have
Yeah,
15
keep
minutes
it
public
very-
comment.
We
Very
do have
quick,
15
please.
minutes, so.
Very quick, please.
So I have to appreciate many of his comments. I'm not a big fan of the bi-directional, y'all know that, but it bears repeating, given some of the concerns that have been voiced about High Street and elsewhere on 13th, for example. So and I know you're looking at alternatives, right? So that's just a general preference, and I get it that they're cheaper. But having been hit by a car myself many years back and still have that injury, not in a bike lane, in a four-way stop, actually. I can sympathize with not so much maybe his rage about it, but the whole design. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
I was just gonna comment that I'm grateful that staff decided to take our recommendation of keeping the bicycle lane on Pearl Street, so that southbound bicyclists who prefer the usual right-hand side bike lane have that option if they want to do that. We have that option on 12th Avenue as an alternative to 13th. So that I think is something to keep in mind if there are future two-way protected bike lanes, as long as there is a neighboring street that has the more, familiar facility, then people have choice.
And we've been sort of promised that Lincoln Street will be the last two-way bikeway.
Yeah.
I hope. Cause
I can't help but saying one really quick thing. Just because I really appreciate Reed's comments too. That's great, because I wish he had stayed because he could hear that staff actually listens and is like, yeah, we can move those signs. But my main thing is just to iterate always that like cars are what's dangerous.
Yeah.
Like, and we have a city street design that's really some old 1950 style getting cars through town as fast as possible. And that's why we have all these one-way streets and all these 2-lane one-way and 4-lane one-way streets.
Yeah.
And we do need to take these things into account, and people are trying, but yeah, we have a lot to do, but cars are what is dangerous and 2-lane one-way streets are dangerous and one-way carways are, that's what's confusing and complicated and what we're up against. That's all I want.
Okay, that concludes our public comment period.
Okay. Okay, and I will say to Brad and Charlie and McKenna, it's really easy for me to overlook the fact that you're here, so if you had your hand up and we're ignoring you, just do something very dramatic, so I see you.
Yeah,
I
feel free to
apologize
just,
ahead of time.
feel free to just unmute yourself and speak if you need to. It's totally fine for you to interrupt if we're not seeing that you've raised your hand or made a comment.
Okay, so the agenda is to approve the notes of the October 2024 meeting. Any corrections or?
I just had something to mention about the meeting notes. I sent them out and then realized that I didn't put the committee member attendance on them. So there's just a blank spot. So it's committee member attendance and it doesn't say anything. So I have already edited that. So the notes that will go up on the website have that.
Thank you.
Any corrections, comments? If not. Anyone move to approve them?
So moved.
Second,
I'll second.
okay. All in favor? Okay, they are approved. The next thing is the letter prepared by the Infrastructure Committee about the Alder Street underpass. And Alan, I think that means you're up, yeah.
Great, yeah. So several of us worked hard on preparing a letter based on the presentation that I gave last month's ATC meeting. And I'm wondering, is there anyone who, I know that Charlie wasn't at that meeting. Is there anyone else who was not at that meeting? Who has any questions? Okay. I just want to follow up a couple of things that were a little bit unclear based on the conversation that followed at the infrastructure subcommittee meeting. There was a lot of question about this Riverfront Urban Renewal District, both the process as well as whether funds could be used for an underpass or crossing. And I've learned that there's not an annual cycle of funding for the urban renewal districts, both downtown and riverfront, but it's apparently more sort of as needed or as requested basis. And there is a public body called the River Guides who review some of those requests. So there are other public bodies that are involved with that. The second question that people had was, is the Riverfront Renewal District funding appropriate, or is it possible to use it for an underpass? And as it states in the letter, there's strong language throughout both the original document that created the renewal district and then the amendment that was created last January in front of City Council, that one of the intentions of that funding is for pedestrian bicycle access and crossing from the riverfront to downtown and the university and neighborhoods. And that's reflected in this letter. So there's no doubt that that's what council really wanted to use the money for, and not exclusively, but that access and connection is important to council. Let's see, there were a couple of things about this letter that I had questions for you all. But I guess first maybe I want to hear thoughts or comments you all.
So I started to ask you before we got started. This is a really stupid question. But I'm wondering, you've got sort of one spot in mind, and it's not sort of my hood, so I'm not frequent in it. So could you tell us, is it just the one location, or when we're asking staff to make this a bigger priority, are there, there's 3 alternatives they could look at there, and if one's a block away from the other, it still could work, that sort of thing. Can you educate me about that?
Right, I mean, I don't have access to the screen right now. I do have, you could look this right here, the slide that I don't have that,
Okay.
but I have this slide here that I had last time, and I can show you kind of, there's a number of different places where it might go.
Okay.
And there are a lot of considerations and I'm not best versed to be able to say which would be the best location for that. But it would be within probably about a 1 or 2 block. With, north, south, or left, right. Near the at grade crossing, within about a block or so of that at grade crossing.
Franklin and
This is Franklin here. Extra road tracks. So, are there other people that were confused about or wanted more information about like where specifically that, might be located? Or is that more clear from last?
Jerry, do you have a question, comment, something?
I'm just curious about the 66 motel and point number 4 there. How much of a factor is their property in this happening?
My estimation is that it's critical. Because you can't put a path on the road right away. And you can go under it, or over it, but you can't put it along it. So to make an underpass really usable and accessible by people of all means, it would need to be close to that at grade crossing at 8th and Hilliard extension. Otherwise, people are gonna have to go too far. And so I don't really see an easy way around that. But
What methods might the city have to ensure that?
well, there would be initially conversations, and that's
Sure.
not something that, I'm not a city staffer, so I don't do it, but there would be conversations about what the future plans are for that. Also, because it's on the transportation system plan, my understanding is that there is some, that the city has some leverage there to create a public right of way. Just like if the city wanted to create a road in a place that they really needed, they could potentially, use eminent domain to be able to do that. As again, I don't have the slide to show you, but you might recall that there, right around that corner of Hilliard and East Broadway, there is a triangular lot that's fenced off with nothing in it. That's city property. And so I think, and that's a valuable piece of land. So I think that there's potential for negotiation with the owners of the 66 motels. Say, I don't know if there's the city has any other plans for that little tiny chunk of land, but potentially they could say, look, you could have this, we'll swap it for some right of way or an easement on the backside of your property when you decide to tear down the motel. But it's not a simple project. It's definitely not a simple project.
I guess just one question, Alan, if, on the assumption that even if approved by by the urban renewal district, this would take a long time for this to actually happen. Do you have any thoughts about whether you'd support the city's going ahead with the improvements along Franklin Boulevard? Like they talked about reducing a lane there and creating a buffer with the existing, but do you have any hesitation that should go ahead or?
No, I think that's a fantastic idea. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. They don't serve the entirely the same function. Yeah. So I had 2 questions after the letter was written for this group. One is as I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation last week, that this project is an underpass is about accessibility. It's about groups of people that, not just bicyclists and pedestrians, but it's people who are using wheelchairs and mobility devices to be able to access the river, and people from the river in that neighborhood to access downtown, the university, and so forth. And it's also about the vitality of the riverfront neighborhood, because if you can't get people can't get there safely, then it's that investment is potentially threatened. So because it has all these different elements that are not strictly infrastructure related, but are definitely, that's a big part of it. I'm wondering if part of the request in this letter really ought to be more than just like, hey, staff, will you consider this? But is there a way that I or other people in a group of us potentially could go to planning development staff, because they're very much involved with the urban I'm sorry, the Riverfront Renewal District, like they're the lead department in the Riverfront Renewal District, so it would be more direct, and they would hopefully have a broader understanding of the needs of their neighborhood beyond just infrastructure. They're thinking about like, how do people get to these houses? How do they get from the house, their new apartments to the university safely? And so forth. So that's question number one. And then question number two is whether there ought to be any time recommendation within the letter. Doesn't just ask staff to pursue this, but there's no period of time. So we could say 2025. Actually.
Personally, I would say the right time is before something else scarfs up all the urban renewal funding. When that is, we've had a hard time getting anything like an answer to that. So that might be one reason to ask the planning people if they have any, input or knowledge of what else is planned in the urban renewal district that might affect this or compete with it or whatever, but obviously getting our bid in first would be an advantage. Do I want staff to drop what they're doing and focus on this? Well, no, not really, especially not if it's not necessary, but you don't want to miss the opportunity.
Not sure how to write that in words.
Yeah, I mean,
I know we've talked about that already, so.
Yeah, I think we said kind of with sufficient urgency was as close as we came.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Well, we could use those words though, Sue, that you said about other things coming down the pipeline as it fits into that larger picture. The other thing I was gonna add to this is, a kind of a closing paragraph that recaps our ask, i.e. we'd like you to do something about it.
Mhm.
I think my main hesitancy in this letter is that I feel like there's a gap in knowledge of like what these funds are currently allocated to. Like, if they're not allocated, awesome. If these are the funds that are being used to make Hilliard two-way, if these are the funds that are being used to provide safe crossing on Broadway and doing that road diet that they're doing there, like, I think those are like really important projects for the people that live in this community and like arguably like might take a higher priority than this underpass. So like, I think letting staff who like hopefully have more information about like where that money is currently going, kind of make the decision there, I think might be the better choice for the timeline.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sympathetic to Peter's point. I mean, personally, I'm in favor of the project if it's with urban renewal funding. If it's out there competing with all the other needs throughout the community, I'm not nearly as big a fan, frankly. So to me, the urban renewal funding piece is key.
Yeah.
And what is the boundary of the urban renewal district?
It includes, I should pull it up here. It goes all the way over to about Onyx Street. Because this was really created for the old,
Yeah.
the Riverfront Research Park that tanked. It includes the area between Broadway and the viaduct, that area there, and then a few blocks, looks like about 6 blocks, maybe 9 blocks, sort of between High and Pearl, between, looks like.
Well, I guess I was specifically asking about the point Peter raised about Hilliard and.
Yes, I believe,
Broadway.
yes, that is.
Yeah.
Mhm, and I believe that there,
But the city currently is not planning on using urban renewal funding for anything on Hilliard or Broadway or anything like that,
I'm
right?
not sure, do we know?
We
if
are
that's
planning to
correct?
use it for Broadway.
We are planning to use urban renewal.
do you know how much is being requested for that?
I think we want about $1 million. We're gonna go to the committee, I think next week.
Yeah, so the, the total amount that's allocated, in the Riverfront Renewal District is, I believe, $115 million. Some of that's already been earmarked. So it's not a small, it's a big pot of money, and of course, there are other competing needs as well. So,
Yeah, I was just gonna add on the thoughts on the timeline of putting a date on there. I think would recommend not adding a date because then it eventually could like expire and you want the letter to be there for longer. So that would be a benefit of not adding a date. I think encouraging a high priority amongst specific funding could be one way to add some urgency to it. Yeah, those are my thoughts. I think it's a really thoughtful and well drafted letter. And since it is a larger scale project, could also recommend or encourage dividing it up into different phases. Because if, not all the funding is available at once. Maybe it's available over the course of like 3 years or something. So, those are my thoughts.
Anybody else or anybody online?
Lost them.
I'll just make a quick comment, Sue, which is since I've worked a little bit with Alan on this, I've become increasingly persuaded that this project is really important if we're ever going to, if we envision someday of Eugene having a really world-class bicycle network, getting rid of as many railroad crossings for cyclists and scooters and people walking with walkers and wheelchairs, all that. This is just a key link, and the urban renewal funding is sort of the key thing that's available right now. And if there's anything that I guess that you could put in here to indicate timeliness, is just more emphasize that at the end of the letter that, hey, this is a once in a blue moon kind of opportunity where there's a funding source available. And it might be at the same time somewhere good to point out that this project isn't just Allen's. This project is in the TSP for funding 20 years out, the project's beyond 20 years. This letter doesn't mention that anywhere, but it's worth pointing out that the official city documents say that this project's a good idea and should happen and as a key part of the network for cyclists and pedestrians, really. And so maybe calling that out and just making a greater emphasis that we want some of this urban renewal funding now, because it may be the only chance. And really, these things only get harder the longer you wait. Like, it's easier to do this project now than it ever will be in the future. So I'll stop there.
Reed, did you have something?
Yeah, just a point of clarification, it is not in the adopted transportation system plan. The TSP is a 20-year list. As Charlie just said, this was in the 20+ year, which was not adopted by council and doesn't exist in any formal document.
Oh, that's good to know.
Plus year facilities on a map that's available via the TSP page so that we could sort of envision what a future network might look like. And so that we could be crafty with funding as it comes up. But just point of clarification, it's actually not in the adopted TSP right now.
Oh, thanks. I didn't understand that those after 20-year projects were not actually formally part of the TSP. My apologies. The rest of what I said stands.
You're saying that they're on the map, but not on a spreadsheet?
They're not in an adopted map either. There, you can find them on like what's called the wall map, which I put up. There's a map that like I use and staff uses.
Okay.
And I said this would be helpful for the public to be able to see like what the overall thing could look like. But for a variety of reasons, including generation of a transportation system development charge based on projects that are adopted in the TSP, we cannot put the universe of projects that could potentially happen, and we can't put everything in there, right? So like, it had to be a amount of projects that we could then start doing some math with. And so the 20+ year stuff is stuff that was either too expensive or too far out for us to consider in the 20-year timeline. And this is one of those.
When was that adopted?
2017, and so it should have been updated already, but then Oregon said, let's do this Climate Friendly and Equitable Communities Act and update all your land use stuff and then follow that transportation. And so now we're gonna try to do it by 2029.
Okay, if there aren't any more questions or discussion, do we want to act on the letter? Either approve it outright, revise it, reject it? I guess those are our options.
I would move to approve it, yeah, I would move to approve it and send it. I think it would be, I mean, I didn't say as much, but I'm with Charlie, very increasingly convinced. The first time Ellen presented on this a year and plus more ago, I was kind of lukewarm, but each successive presentation has gotten me much more excited and seeing the importance of it. So I think it reads well, and be happy to.
Is there a second?
I would second that.
Okay. Any more discussion or questions or comments or whatever? Are we ready for a vote? Okay, I guess all in favor of the motion?
You have to choose something. You can do yes, abstain, or block. Abstain, got 2 abstains, yes, and yes, it's online. Okay.
And those of you who are abstaining, would you want to just give us a little bit of an explanation or what's your line of thinking?
I mean, I love this idea. I'm hearing Reed that it's on a longer term map, but I haven't really like dug, I mean, I've always thought there should be an underpass there. Like, I'm not principally against it at all. I haven't read about the like money, or understanding like the funding mechanism or the others, like done any like really delved into the topic myself beyond what we've discussed here. I just want to like admit that, which is why I would also feel very bad to be like, no. And because principally like, every time I ride there, I'm like, oh, it'd be great if there was an underpass here. And I hate the idea of getting to thinking, and Mary said something last time about like what funds are competing and that, and I also think that staff won't like listen to us anyway if it doesn't like work out. So sometimes it's cool to just suggest the best of things. So I'm like inclined to agree with it. I just, there might be like a lot of parts of town where there's something that like a massive project that is could be a very big improvement to what we currently have. Could look good to me, and whether that one is my favorite or not is very hard to say. But I also think we should have them all on the board. But that's why, yeah, I continue to be interested in like having these discussions repeatedly, and also hearing like about this longer term project, like actually looking at that map. Now that Reed's saying there's a map, I'd actually love for us to have someday look at that and just talk about what our favorite are and why certain ones have been prioritized and over others, and where we can be effective at being like, hey, council, maybe do this instead, and hey, staff, maybe encourage council to do this instead. I just don't feel super informed about the specific project, much as Alan has done like a great job and delved into the thing. Alan has done that and like that's how I feel. I have not done that yet and I am. But yeah, just generally speaking, every time I ride there, I'm like, there absolutely should be an underpass here.
Thanks. And Peter, did you have any thoughts or?
Yeah, I mean, I want the underpass. I buy into that vision for sure, and I understand the timeliness of like the Motel 6 is vacant, this funding is available. I feel like I can't fully support it until I know what those urban renewal funds are currently allocated to and like what else they would go to. That they would go to this underpass instead. That's just, I can't vote without that answer.
Okay.
I'll see if I can find additional information to sort of answer that question.
Okay.
Well, those are great.
Anything
Also,
you can find
yeah.
out in the urban renewal
Yeah.
district, please share. it,
Yeah,
'cause
it
it's
sounds
been
like
very opaque.
There's more information needed just about that in general, so.
It's hard to find even who the deciders
Yeah.
are.
But I think that's another like really good point. I really appreciate the offer from Willow, because I also think that's like, well, those are the conversations we should be having.
Yeah.
The response, that's absolutely the appropriate response is, maybe I should know the answer to that question.
Okay, thank you, Alan, for your work on this.
Yeah, thank you.
Are you gonna add something, Ray?
Not my pigs, not my farm.
Okay,
great.
moving on, the infrastructure committee has been busy. We got the second
Yeah.
set of recommendations. These are on the Oakway protected bikeway.
All right. Sweet.
And one more time, I'd like to thank Catherine for the time she put in going out there with us and looking at it and talking, being available. That was very helpful.
Here we go. All right, yeah, Willow, would you be able to pull up Google Maps? Go to that neighborhood. Sweet. Yeah, so I understand a lot of people don't live in this part of town and may not visit often. So I wanted to provide some context. If you could just zoom out to that whole like area, yeah, like that. So like we're talking about the northern part of Eugene today, and Oakway is this street right in the middle. It's pretty important because right now there's only like 2 all ages and abilities bikeways in this part of town. You have the I-5 path over here, which is really safe, not the most pleasant thing in the world. I ride it once a week and I'm glad it's there. Yeah. And then you have the river path, which is beautiful and awesome and doesn't go close to a lot of destinations. It goes great for these neighborhoods. So Oakway, right down the heart of these neighborhoods where 35,000 people live. And so another thing I want to point out is just how many cul-de-sacs are in this area, which makes these arterial connections really important. Because unlike in other parts of town where you can take a quiet street, you can take 12th Street if you don't want to be on 13th or 11th. Here you don't really have other options. You kind of have to go on the busy streets, and that's part of the reason why these protected bike lanes here are so important. So to go to the recommendations, I think our speaker today would be really happy to hear the first one, that we prefer directional bike lanes to bi-directional bike lanes. I'm pretty sure staff is already leaning this way, but Catherine mentioned this was still something that potentially was being thought about. They're easier for all traffic to understand. There's enough right-of-way on this road to fit directional bikeways. And Oakway Road is already a 2-way street, and so it makes sense to have directional bikeways here. I want to go through all the recommendations, and then if you have questions, at the end of the first page, I'll leave some space from there. So then these next 2 recommendations are for that intersection at Oakway Road and Caoyang, which is at the north side. If you could zoom in on that. So yeah, that's good. Or a little bit out, actually. Yeah, so here is a kind of a weird, it's actually a 4-way intersection, but it looks like a 3-way. But that dead end pretty soon. And so a lot of bikes are going to be turning left here, either to go from Oakway to continue north to Gillam, or to go to Willackenzie, which is going to be a protected bike lane in the future. That's on the TSP. And Willackenzie is also really important because it goes next to Sheldon High School. So if we're thinking about all ages and abilities, we want these high schoolers to be
And
able
the Sheldon Community Center too.
and Sheldon Community Center, yeah. And so these two recommendations are about making it easier for bikes to turn left. The first one is a shorter term one. Yeah, you're back. Add camera detectors or improve the loop detectors at Oakway Road and Cal Young intersection in the general purpose lanes. So this is the left turn lanes that already exist, where cars and bikes share the lane. Currently, in my personal experience, I will wait there indefinitely until a car comes up behind me and activates that detector. That's not great. And so either change those loops or add cameras would be really nice, even before any other changes are made. So that way left turn cyclists are actually detected there. And the other thing, the ideal thing would be installing dedicated bicycle signals like we have on our on 8th Street or on High Street at this intersection of Oakway Road and Cal Young. And so there'll be lots of left turning bicycle traffic at Oakway Road and Cal Young to protect the future protected bikeway on Willackenzie and the Gillum Road bike lane. So we shouldn't expect bicycles to merge with car traffic if this is going to be all ages and abilities. And the other thing Catherine mentioned is for some reason it's easier to add one. If we try to add two, it's going to be a lot more complicated. I think they'd have to like upgrade the signals or something. So prioritize the one for people who are traveling north currently. Because people traveling west, there's going to be a separate funding, a separate project for Willackenzie and Cal Young. And so maybe that could be added later. And then we are undecided on whether it would be more helpful to repurpose the turn lane or the parking lane on Oakway Road. So currently Oakway Road is 3 driving lanes. So, and then a parking lane. And so Catherine was mentioning either the parking lane or the turn lane might be used to get the space for the protected bike lane. And we didn't really have a strong opinion on that. So I wrote to try to find case studies and see which one is better for traffic calming, because our goal is to keep drivers at legal speeds. And so whichever one's more effective for that. All right, so now we're going to the south side of this section, improve the signage to make it clear this movement. So yeah, you can go down Oakway. And yes, so now we enter this mess. And what bikes are supposed to do, if you can zoom in a lot here, is bikes are supposed to go here and get onto this sidewalk. As cars are going here, turning right. Really shallow angle, high speed conflict. That's quite dangerous. And so our recommendation is to try to throw the bikes up on the sidewalk and have them cross as pedestrian like that. Just to make it a lot clearer there. And so either have signage there, ideally a concrete ramp to make that movement really intuitive for cyclists traveling south. So that's that recommendation.
That's this recommendation 5.
Yeah.
Okay.
Clarify the bicycle movement southbound Oakway Road to hop up on that sidewalk is the idea there. And then this was recommended during our ride. The concrete surface right now is really bumpy, especially when you have smaller scooter tires or skateboard tires. And so an asphalt surface might be a lot better ride on the bikeway than the current concrete, because those panels are kind of shifting.
That's in here?
Yeah, the whole.
Oh, that's the whole thing. That's in the segment, yeah, the whole.
So just this whole
Yeah,
thing?
that.
Yeah.
Gotcha, okay.
Mostly just that.
Yep.
Because you're actually mostly on bike path on this section.
Yeah.
Yeah, on Oakway itself, it's on.
On Oakway itself is the bumpy.
That's the,
It's
where
just
the
that
bike
stuff,
lane
concrete
sucks.
channels.
Question about the crossing there.
Yeah.
Is there a light for pedestrians or cyclists to cross there? Because I know
Yeah.
when you're waiting in your car, you're back there.
Yeah, so there is
Like
a pedestrian
crosswalk
crosswalk here. It
Okay.
runs as the same time as this right turning traffic.
Oh.
So that light doesn't deal with that main dangerous
Mhm,
conflict there.
You also have to basically walk across the street.
So there's
twice
a
and
big
wait
button there.
Yes.
And then there's a yes, go here, but it's at the,
We'll zoom in on that sign, that green sign on the right.
Yeah.
That explains it perfectly.
I do actually kind of like this sign.
This sign's really funny.
Well, I could see that.
It's telling you where this goes.
Mm.
But yeah, the right turning traffic onto this is a hazard.
And to go the other direction, you now have to walk across that street. again.
Yes, yeah, you have to beg
So you have to
twice.
wait for 2 signals of the bike
That's true.
jumping,
That's right.
which is a pain.
Sweet. And then these last two, lower speed limit on Oakway to 25 miles per hour. We have people biking to high school. We have a lot of people crossing the street to go to Trader Joe's and all these destinations. And so having 35 mile per hour traffic, or I mean, people drive on at 40 all the time, is not very conducive to people biking to school.
Is it 30 right now?
I
I think it
should
might
know
be
this.
35. It's,
30.
Is it 35?
I don't know for sure.
I-
I know it's
it's-
over 25.
Catherine would
Yeah.
know what it is.
Yeah. And then,
It's-
yeah.
It's fast.
it is fast, and people do drive way over all the time.
Mhm.
And then especially at night. Consider ways to enhance the safety in crossing Oakway, especially in the vicinity of Oakway Mall. There's one flashing beacon. But for the amount of like middle housing that's being built in this area, plus the Trader Joe's and all these destinations, it would be nice to have a lot more crossings.
So more of these mid-block crossings, since there
Yeah.
aren't very many
Yeah,
intersections.
there's just a
Yeah.
number of driveways there that, and it's hard to say one is more heavily used than another, so we couldn't really pick favorites for which one's more important than another, but, you know, there's one by the hotel, there's one by, yeah, there's like three different driveways that all get.
Yeah, like by that bus stop would be a great spot,
Yeah.
like Fairway
Mhm.
Loop.
Let's
Mhm.
just say it's not pedestrian friendly.
Yes.
Right, very few crossings.
Yeah.
currently available.
Like drive here.
Yeah.
And don't consider getting here any other way.
Yeah, any other questions about the recommendations for Oakway before we move on to the area around it?
I do.
Yeah.
Did you talk about, when you were out there, the possibility of, reducing the radius of that curb from Oakway onto Southwood?
Yeah, it's.
That would slow down.
Swooping.
Yeah,
We did talk more about Southwood, but I think that's farther down on the list.
yeah, we didn't talk
Okay.
about the radius of that. We do have another suggestion for making that crossing safer that we can get to in a bit. But we didn't talk about the radius
Yeah.
itself, because that is true, like, that is a very wide turn that people take at high speeds.
Yeah, because actually Catherine said that intersection is not part of the project, or at least it wasn't. Now it's been delayed for a year or two because ODOT wants in on working with that intersection, so maybe it is now. But at the time, yeah, that whole intersection is,
Is an issue.
yeah.
But that's a good idea, something to add is, yeah, tackling that really wide turning radius.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if it's just with flexi posts would be nice.
Mm.
Was there a parking study on this? Do we have the results from that?
Nobody parks on Oakway.
Yeah,
basically.
I think it was about 4% occupancy or something. It was definitely below
It's ongoing.
10%.
You can participate right now.
Yeah.
So basically, we're running parking counts. Peter and Sue have both been out there counting parking, and so has Catherine. And the spreadsheet's pretty funny because it's usually just like 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0. So it's very low utilized parking.
It's the easiest parking count I've ever done.
Yeah.
The tricky thing is the people who do park on it tend to be gardeners who have long trucks with trailers. And I do wonder if they just park in the bike lane if we didn't put a parking lane there.
Mhm.
Because I've seen that on Hawkins a lot.
Also, so if you were to take out the parking, is it either or you're taking out the parking or the two-way left turn lane, or? Did you
It
take
depends
out
on how
both?
ambitious the city is, but probably yes.
I think there was a I do know.
Look-
The
Looking at
room for
either-
protection has to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
So there's 2 travel lanes here, there's 2 bike lanes, and then there's sort of an extra two-way left turn lane and an extra parking lane. One of the room for the protection of the bike lane comes from one of those.
I
Yeah.
think Mackenzie was questioning whether we could take them both. Maybe I'm wrong, but I asked that question
Yeah.
also. And it
Yeah.
seemed like,
I guess the question would be, what would we do with that space? Like, if you want to add a grassy median, that would be great, but like, I don't know if that's the scope of the project.
Mm, mhm. Yeah, we usually I feel like we usually look at taking away the minimum amount of things we have to take away in order to get a protected bikeway in, not the maximum amount of things we could take away.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that if you all felt like your recommendation was to remove both and add planter medians or something, that is, that could be a recommendation from ATC, whether or not we feel like we'd have the funding or the political capital to do that.
I think we did discuss that is the like ideal future plan.
Yeah.
Like, obviously. Narrow streets that are one way, or that are like only one lane
Yeah,
and like very pleasant to bike on are like the.
I would rather be realistic though.
I was gonna say, we want to keep Catherine alive.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, if you did wanna add to this letter, like, a thing at the very bottom that was like visionary idea, you know, we like,
yeah.
it doesn't hurt to dream a little bit, I guess.
Lucy, did you have?
Oh, yeah, my sign up. Two thoughts, questions. One being, I know that like Complete Streets guide is coming, and it was like for, you know, the more walkable streets downtown versus like these higher car traffic
Mhm.
areas. So I'm just wondering how like that vision of the Complete Streets would fall into like this category of
Right.
bike lane.
Do we happen to know what the classification is for Oakway in the Complete Streets guide?
Well, I mean, it's already complete. There's just,
Yeah.
there's just more travel lanes potentially than there would need to be.
Mhm.
One
Yeah,
of those being a parking lane. So, I mean, it's got sidewalks on both sides, it's got bike lanes, there are bus stops.
Needing a bus
It's
service.
got northbound and southbound lane, it's got all the stuff. It's really more about tuning it so that it's comfortable for people to use,
Mhm.
because it's complete in that there's stuff there, it's just not comfortable.
Yeah.
So we've got recommendations on like how to treat that and, you know, the width of the separation between automobile lane and the bike lane and those sorts of things are really what's in the Complete Streets design guide.
Mhm.
We're just trying to build something that makes it more all ages and abilities than what's there.
Mm.
And quite
I
frankly,
see.
Oakway itself is a piece of cake compared to everything on
Yeah.
either end of it.
Yeah, and
So-
I do want to get to that part after McKenna's question.
Yeah, we kind of.
Oh, I had a two-part
Oh,
question.
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
My other comment was, has the city ever thought about that intersection in Coburg? Looks like really spacious, almost round, as it is now. Have you ever thought about putting a roundabout there and what that would do for the intersection?
That's a story for another time, maybe over here.
All
I
right,
see what you see.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's my other comment.
Okay.
McKenna, take it away.
I guess another thing that I just wanted to maybe flag as like a potential interim thing would be like a leading pedestrian interval at Oakway and Coburg at that weird intersection where you're supposed to get up onto the sidewalk to cross to get to the bike path. Yeah, right there. Just to give pedestrians and bikes, you know, a 2-second jump before the light turns green for those right turning vehicles.
Really good idea.
That's a really good idea. Yeah, I want to add that to the letter. Thanks, McKenna.
Is that the cars can turn right on red there?
I don't know.
That's I guess that was a
Put
question.
the little guy in.
Can cars turn right on red there?
Let's see if we can see
Yeah.
if they have.
Positive.
Where
Great.
is, whoa,
I don't think so.
where is their
Right
light?
there, zoom in on that mast arm above those white cars. To
This
your
one?
left, to the left.
Oh, sorry. This one.
Yeah.
In those intersections.
No turn on
Yeah.
red.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So
that.
there's that.
Found it.
that leading
Yeah.
pedestrian interval would
There's
really help.
also, yeah, there's also another sign on there's a vehicle pedestal. Like if you go farther north. Before the curb cut,
This way.
there's, yeah. So
Oh,
there's
geez.
other way.
Sorry.
Yeah,
What am I
so
looking
that pedestal. Nope, other to your right a little bit. Yeah, that has a no turn. Oh, keep going to your left. In between. It's right next to that black car. There's also a no turn
Oh,
Oh, that.
on right.
next to there.
Yeah.
On here.
Yeah,
Oh, there's a light right there.
Oh,
Interesting.
All right, I do want to move on
Yeah.
to the.
Oh, yeah, look at
Yeah.
that.
Very-
The leading pedestrian interval is a good idea though.
Yeah, yeah, definitely want to add that.
Okay, back to the recommendations.
So fixing Oakway is great, but the connection from Oakway to destinations south is really problematic. And so in these recommendations, we wanted to address those as well, specifically that wide sidewalk along Coburg with all the driveways and the slip lanes and all that.
So this first thing, the walk signal crossing Cedarwood should activate for both Coburg Road and I-5 exit phases. That's a really hard thing to write out. And so if we could just go to that intersection, it's a lot easier to just point out. Yeah, so if you go to those.
It's down this way, right?
Yeah. Yep, right there.
Cedarwood.
So right
Yeah,
now,
there's-
this crosswalk will only activate with the Coburg cars. But there's no reason except the mechanics of the signal why it shouldn't be able to also go with this off ramp.
Yeah.
So I understand that would require fixing the signal, but ideally fixing that signal would one day happen. So that's that recommendation. And the second one is very similar, which is that during peak times when there's a lot of cars coming through anyway, stop making bicyclists press the beg button, please. Because stopping, balancing, pressing, rebalancing, starting again is not really all ages and abilities friendly. I understand at night when the signal times are really short, that like ODOT wants to do that to get as many cars to the intersection as possible. But if the signal, like during rush hour when lots of cars are going through anyway, just have the pedestrian signal always going at the same time. This is the really fun one. Add a raised crosswalk at the curb cut across Southwood a few hundred feet from the Coburg intersection. And provide a two-way bikeway on the north side of Southwood, protected if possible. So this is going back to Southwood, a little bit north, kind of jumping back and forth here. So right now there's this curb cut right here for cyclists on this bike lane to dash across high-speed traffic and get onto our sidewalk. We were thinking, why not just make cyclists not and pedestrians not have to deal with that massive intersection up there in the first place? And instead add a safe raised crossing here where that curb cut already exists and not have to deal with that whole intersection. And so ideally the street would be narrowed to like 11 feet wide or something, to slow traffic, maybe a raised crosswalk. Have everyone cross up here and go on their merry way without having to deal with anything. That was that recommendation.
And then that recommendation also says two-way bikeway on the north side.
So that's just the idea, of just like widening the sidewalk a little bit.
Oh,
So that way
Oh,
you
or
can have
actually
like
on the
traffic up.
street. I mean, there's plenty
Or
of
on the
room on
street.
that street.
That's true.
And cars go flying down that.
That street, I would love to know actually how wide that is, because it's way more than the 11
Yeah.
feet it is.
It's,
so there could be like a curb protected
yeah,
two-way space for people coming on and off the path to get over to.
yeah, because it
Yeah.
functions
This
as an
corner.
on-ramp, a very long on-ramp to the freeway.
Yes, yeah,
I think it'd be good for the bowling alleys business too.
yeah.
Okay. Charlotte, do you have a comment about that?
Do you want us to hold till the end of the page?
Yeah, in the interest
Okay,
of time, I
okay,
don't know.
Yeah, I think we are running short.
Yeah, and then this last one is in the TSB, but I did not see if it's a 20-year TSB thing or not, so we have to double check that. But, there is a huge gap in the cul-de-sacs, that would connect these two areas, Greenwood Street and Spyglass Street. And so the area in between is owned by Oakway Gulf Incorporated. And so that is up in Spyglass, really north, right here. So it would be nice if all these people could use our beautiful Oakway protected bike lane, and that would require an access way connecting these two cul-de-sacs. There already is a dirt path that people use all the time that connects them, but we have to get official permission, and yeah. And I know that would be tricky, but that would be really nice for our Oakway.
Cause it's basically showing there's a little lake here and there's a little lake here,
Yeah.
and you're saying there's a dirt path
There is, yeah.
that connects.
Yeah.
The path back there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it'd be really nice if that was a formal paved access way,
Gotcha.
and that would be really helpful for this whole project, because more people can use our bike way.
Okay, and those are the recommendations.
Yes.
Thank you, infrastructure committee.
Well done.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, yeah, thank you very much. This is fabulous. My inquiry about number 3 on this page is, even if we were to shift a crosswalk down because of the way that Southwood functions as this long ramp, when I think of all ages and abilities, I'm thinking, oh yeah, I'm gonna scurry across there. So it still doesn't feel particularly safe. And I'm wondering if there's when we put this together, we say, or other appropriate solutions. This is the one we've come up with so far.
Yeah.
You know, it's better than it is, but it feels to me like it's still not good enough.
I think for all ages and abilities, you would probably still want them to use the signal back at the head of Southwood, you know, there, you know, you've got your signal and, this is more for people who don't, like me, who don't want to wait for the damn signal. And this is where I cross all the time. And you just have much better visualization of who's coming down Southwood than you do at the
And
intersection.
there's gaps in the traffic that
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
there
easy
you go.
enough to do that, so.
yeah,
You know.
almost always. Once in a while, I have to stop, wait for a gap and then
Oh.
cross, but it's almost, you can almost always get across.
It
and
doesn't
it's
feel like
just- I can
jaywalking.
see what's coming if I'm down there as opposed to at the signal, because I can't tell who's coming from what direction and where they're going.
Also, ideally, if we narrowed that lane and even made a
Mm.
raised intersection, like cars would have to slow down
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yield to traffic. And arguably, I'd say it's more all ages and ability than the current crosswalk that even though it
Oh, yeah.
says green,
I know.
you have to know it's not actually safe,
Right.
even though it tells you it's safe, which I think is really problematic.
Yeah,
I
agreed.
think I may have also suggested reducing the speed limit on Southwood. if possible.
I think,
It's,
yeah.
it's 40 miles
Well,
an
yeah,
hour.
I know.
It's 40?
Is it?
Yeah,
Oh, on Southwood?
but again, it's, as long as it's that wide open, I don't think it stops.
Yeah, right
It's
there.
gonna have any effect.
Well, but if there's also.
This is where
a
there's
traffic-
already a little sneaky curb cut.
If there's
I
also,
think, put
if
there.
you're condoning the
that
curb.
curb
cut.
cut, yeah.
Yeah, for bike riders.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
To kind of make that transition
Yeah.
from this bike lane over to this.
And a lot of us already kind
Yeah.
of do it the other direction too.
Right, wrong way in the bike
And
lane for
riding
a
against
second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think it also makes sense to add a raised crosswalk here, or maybe even, put more speed bumps on this road to
Yes.
limit the traffic. Speed, because once you go further down Southwood, there is a light there, so there's really no point in like getting up to high speeds to get on the on-ramp.
Yeah.
Because you
Yeah.
have to stop at that light
Yeah.
anyways to then go onto the on-ramp, so. I think that would make sense for drivers, and I don't think they would be very distressed with the change. That's all I wanted to add. Great idea.
Yeah, we might add a raised crosswalk there. Like a curb cut across.
With the
Oh, is it
signal,
not? Doesn't say raised?
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, raised is important. yeah.
you thinking with the flashing signal or just the fact that it's raised, it becomes like a speed bump?
I mean, yeah, flashing signal would be great. Yeah, I didn't go into that much detail.
What-
but
yeah,
We'll let our transportation planners figure that one out.
Yeah.
Like,
Year and a
yeah,
half before I'm one of those.
can you have a crosswalk that just says like yield to pedestrians without the stop sign, or I don't know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, if it were raised and striped that.
Yeah,
Yeah, with a sign that says pedestrian, stop for pedestrians. Yeah, it doesn't have to have the lights in order to be a legal crosswalk. Cool. Okay,
Okay, we're a little bit over time, so are there any more pertinent questions, or are we ready to act on this?
Yeah, I guess the main addition is the leading pedestrian interval at Coburg and Oakway.
And I would say on the raised crosswalk.
Yeah, and raised.
On the back, I know.
Yeah, raise it, so, yeah. Just crosswalk.
And what's your hope with this, that we make some kind of formal
Yeah, this is,
recommendation?
Yeah,
Formal
these are-
recommendation,
These are our
yeah,
recommendations.
I'll motion we do that.
Second.
Any questions, discussion?
I guess we should just clarify that like these additions are added, you know?
Yeah, with those.
Yeah, with those two
So
additions,
the
yeah.
pedestrian interval, the signal and the raised crosswalk, Southwood. I
Traffic.
can't see, can't see the other folks
We just-
online, but
oh,
anyway, all in favor? Signify? Okay,
that looks
it's approved.
unanimous.
Great,
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for your work. on this.
yeah, thank you for putting that together.
All right, that brings us to our break for 2 minutes in theory.
So the Oakway process is gonna kick off pretty soon too, so this isn't your last chance to talk about that project.
Mhm.
We're also currently contracting with some people who know what they're doing so that we can test some designs with them and they can draw some things up for us. So you'll hear about it again. neighborhood bikeways and what would make them feel more comfortable or safer, and diversion or adding diverters comes up quite a bit.
Mhm.
And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the current state of diversion in Eugene, which is that we don't really use, we haven't added any in quite a while, and that sucks. Did you send out the policy to folks?
I did not send out the
Okay.
policy.
If you want to see the policy, Willow has a copy. It is very convoluted. Next slide.
Oh,
Oh, you're doing 5 things.
I'm doing 5 things. Oh, geez, okay.
Okay, so I'll talk about what traffic diversion is, why the heck you would ever do something like that. What the design looks like and what we've done, all using Eugene context, like this, these are things that actually exist out there. And then what the issues are, like why don't we have more of these? And then we can talk more about them. So what's traffic diversion? A diverter is an island built at an intersection to alter the movement of through or turning vehicle traffic. Partial diversion means that like bikes and peds can go through. Full diversion means we're just closing this off to everybody. So this is an example here, and I'll show you an example later, like Fifth and El Maiden has basically this treatment where nobody really gets to go through on the streets. You sort of have to do a turning movement. But if you're walking or biking, you can sort of leak through the middle. We create some spaces for folks to be able to go through. So that's what diversion is. It's not letting cars into a segment of roadway where they would normally be able to go through standard intersection design.
Hey, real quickly, we aren't seeing the slides online. If
Oh, no.
Thank you, sorry.
thank you.
Thanks for saying something. There we go. You're seeing it now, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Lovely. Next one. Diverters are commonly designed to maintain through travel for people walking and biking, even while altering routes for automobiles. And that's basically the summary of what diverters are and what they're supposed to do. Unless you're like a garbage truck or like an emergent, like a fire engine, you just kind of go through that stuff, but most people generally obey those diverters. Why? Why the heck would we want to do something like this? Well, one, traffic calming, in that we would want to, when you have to share the lane, if you're biking with a car, it's nicer if there are fewer cars and if they are moving slower. And so the moving slower part happens through a variety of street design treatments, including things like traffic calming, street trees, some other things. But the volume is really something that we can control through things like diversion, where we're not inviting cars onto that street. And so it also reduces cut through traffic because of that, because we don't invite cars to use that street. People aren't using it to go around another busier streets. Alder Street's a good example of that, where Hilliard used to get really busy. Folks would sort of jump over to Alder Street and say, I'll do this instead. It's not very comfortable for them to do that anymore. We've got a traffic calming and some neighborhood traffic circles. And it just enhances the comfort of that shared lane so that folks feel more comfortable using a bicycle there. And I would say increases the perception of safety. You're still sharing that lane with other folks. But because there are fewer of them, it feels generally safer. And it's basically one of the menu of options for our neighborhood greenways. Neighborhood greenways, or bicycle boulevards as they are called in the TSP, are low speed, low volume local streets where we expect people to be walking and biking, and we're assembling routes where folks can take the lane comfortably or walk comfortably. And then we're trying to fix the intersections with major arterial streets so that we can create or cobble together these little patches of local streets that feel comfortable for walking and biking, and you don't ever have to get on an arterial, presumably. They can also be beautiful things. Some of our examples of early traffic calming include 15th Avenue, like once you get over near the Fern Ridge Path, where we've got lots of planters and things that sort of pop out. There's stuff grown in them. It's kind of cool. So that can do that. Reinforcing bicycle priority. And you know, on a neighborhood greenway, we really want cars to feel like guests in that situation. And so this is really designed for bikes. We put some signs up and say this is for bikes, and we put some pavement markings down and we say this is for bikes, and then we tune it for bike speeds, and then people driving say this is way too slow. And we said, yep, we did that on purpose because this is a neighborhood greenway and it is prioritized for biking. Next slide. So what do they look like? How do you do that? So here is an example of Monroe at Broadway, where we just bump an entire curb out. And so folks trying to go this way will run out of street to do that. You put a big old do not enter sign except bikes. And you sort of say, hey, bikes, you can figure it out, you can fit just fine. And then hopefully most cars obey that. There's another example like this on the next slide, which, this is 24th at Alder, which some folks are very familiar with. We also, put in a yellow center line there just to reinforce that this is really a one-way thing. And you shouldn't be driving into here. Next slide. This is 19th at Alder. If you go a little bit north of that, this is where we actually prohibit through movement for cars in both directions. And they are meant to turn right if they're going northbound or right if they're going southbound, but people walking and biking can go straight through. Next slide. This is an example like on that first slide. This is like Al Maiden at Fifth, where basically there's just that little yellow curb in the middle, and there's some gaps on the side of that where bikes can continue to go through on Fifth Avenue. And everybody else who's driving has to sort of turn around that area. So that's the only example I can think of in the city that we have exactly like that. Next slide. We have a couple of these where we use like a guardrail sort of mid-block and say, okay, you're done. That's it. and I don't know how long ago these were done. There's a couple of them that I can think of. This is like the coolest one because it's sort of shady and nice. But we've got a couple of examples of this too. And then this is an example of like a full diversion where like this Whole Foods, you can't come in or out of that because we put a little curb there. And if we had a lot of encroachment of people driving over that, we'd actually put some vertical elements on there so that it would prevent passage. But at this driveway, we're saying, yeah, that's a right in, right out only. We don't want folks getting into the other lanes. So we've got examples of both partial and full.
In that intersection particularly, would it be beneficial, like close off that section element so that cars don't think they can exit that way? Like it still looks like that's enough space for the car to get out, but then they can't go over the curb.
Well,
Or
they
is
shouldn't
that-
if
or
they
is that a
maintain
car lane?
directionality. So that's
Oh.
a right only sign, and then that's an in
I
on the
see.
far side. So hopefully they're not doing that. I don't see them doing that. I go that way sometimes, but yeah, I mean, we could do more there.
I was imagining that whole big lane was just for bikes and just being happy about that.
Yeah,
Never
it's for
mind,
the
that's for
folks coming
cars.
down and turning right into the.
Yeah, never mind. I walk back my comment.
If they do so many great things, why don't we have more of them? Well, emergency and maintenance access. So our emergency responders and our maintenance folks that maintain the streets and the lights and the signs and the markings all drive very large vehicles. And they're trying to get, especially in the case of emergency services, they're trying to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible. And they're actually rated for that. And so there are these national rankings and they're trying to get a certain response time and basically there's a performance standard that they're trying to meet. And so anytime we block off a street, we're disrupting the grid. We're saying you can take any of these streets except for this one. And so then they would have to go around that. Now, if you have an emergency that you're responding to on that street, that can become difficult and it can delay. And so they don't like that. Maintenance is sort of the same thing, depending on how it's designed. Some of these things can be difficult to maintain because generally speaking, like our sweepers are in sweeper trucks. They don't get out of them with like a broom ever. And so if a machine can't pick up stuff or go or drive through, like on 19th at Alder, you might notice there's a lot of leaves around it all the time. It's because they don't have a machine that will fit in there to do anything. And so it just doesn't happen. And so that's part of the problem with diversion. Another is support. Neighborhood greenways overall, when you talk about slowing down a speed and making it more comfortable for walking and biking, some folks are gonna go, yeah, that's exactly what this street should be. And some folks are gonna go, wait a minute. I have people visiting my house all the time. My daughter comes here. I need to have space for parking, all of those things. So you need a lot of support for that. Transportation planning staff can't really agree on what the devices should look like or where they should go. There's also traffic standards. And so we've got different criteria for national functional classifications of streets. Currently, we can only do this on local streets, but some local streets have a higher function in practice because there's like a school or a park or something on them. that would potentially drive larger traffic or some kind of emergency response vehicle. And so the grid isn't as simple as it looks all the time, depending on where your emergency, like your fire engine is emanating from. There might be certain routes that are better than others. And then the existing process, if you want to see how convoluted that is, Willow, I sent you a copy of it. It is bonkers. It's the only thing I can think of where not only do we have to do like a traffic analysis on the street where we would potentially put the diversion, we have to go 2 streets over and do those as well. We have to talk to everybody who would possibly be impacted. There's a whole list of criteria that we have to satisfy as part of this. We don't have anything else that looks like this. This policy dates back to 1994. So we don't like it, and so we haven't really been using it. And we need to change it, and we haven't had time to change it. And so all of those things mean we're stuck with this really onerous process that doesn't really work very well. And so it kind of sucks. Next slide. I guess I thought it might have had something in there from the Complete Streets Design Guide, but as I mentioned, it's really only for local streets. We don't have thresholds for how many cars it should be. I mean, I think that's one of the things that we're missing. When you look at guidance from other cities that are doing this, Portland, Seattle, some other places that have guidelines around diverters and diversion, they say, you know, like we're trying to tune traffic to get below 1,500 vehicles per day or something. Most of our local streets see fewer than 300 or 400. And so right from the beginning, we're just way off in terms of scale from the comparables that are easy to find online. And so we haven't been able to agree on what those thresholds should be for when we've decided to do a diverter. In traffic calming, we've gotten around that by rewriting our traffic calming process to say traffic calming can be a standard feature of a neighborhood greenway. We could do that same thing with diverters if we wanted to. But diverters are a little bit different because although a traffic calming device like a speed cushion will slow down a fire engine, diversion means the fire engine probably isn't going to use that route. And so it's a little bit more difficult internally to get those sorts of things done. And we're always thinking about all of our partners. And so it's just a more difficult conversation. But that's where we are with diverters. We've got some really cool examples. I think that they're very functional. I'd like to be doing more of them. Our existing process is very time consuming and difficult. And we're sort of afraid of them for that reason, because they're also appealable. So we could go through all of that work. And at the end of the day, somebody could say, you didn't do this right. And because of the way that policy is written, I don't feel like it's objective enough to withstand scrutiny. In other words, I feel like if we got in front of a hearings official, this is why we're afraid of it, not because it's more work, that we could have done all the work and then made an engineering judgment that this is a good idea based on the data that we've collected. And somebody else could look at those figures and say, nah, I don't think you did. And so then it could all go away. And we did all of that for nothing. And so we don't want to do that. And so it sounds like we should rewrite our policy, and I would agree. We haven't had time to do that yet. And so the cycles have changed, folks. We're asking, like, how can we advocate for things? And he's like, well, you know, talk to your counselor about diversion. And if you think it's great, tell them to direct staff to update the policy so that we can have more of it. Because at this point, we just don't have the resources to be able to do the analysis I feel we would need to do in a comparable analysis, as well as, you know, getting best practice and current standards together and figuring out what that policy would look like. It's going to take some time, and then we're going to have to get it adopted. And right now it's really hard to get on a schedule for a planning commission or for city council. Anyway, it will take a little bit of time. But that is the current state of diversion and diverters. Questions?
Yeah, Peter, go ahead.
Do you know why that 1994 policy was written? Was it reactionary to a specific thing?
I do not know. I know that we were doing a heck of a lot of diversion in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I don't know, at one point in the 90s, we stopped. Maybe it coincides with that policy. I'm not sure. But like 15th Avenue, which is the one I like to point to, we were calling those livable streets back in like 1991. You know, we think we've got this new term. Everything's been done. So we already thought of that. and that's what that is. And so like we were able just to do that. And we had this whole menu of things you could just throw at a street to make it more livable. And slowly we've sort of dialed back on that based on objective criteria like traffic speeds, which is why the only traffic calming devices we use right now are the vertical deflection, where it feels like your car's gonna launch into the air, because they're effective. And so, but they're not beautiful, right? So we're not doing the beautiful stuff anymore. We're just doing the stuff that's potentially more objective and defendable for when we invariably encounter some resistance. And that's just kind of where we ended up based on a bunch of decision makers from over the decades. And we can push that. We can say, okay, these things should be beautiful too, or kind of say, let's think about this differently. And we just need direction to be able to do that, because we've gotten to where we are based on potentially, my guess is, pushback.
Yeah.
And so we've changed.
Do we still build sideways deflection, the chicanes as well?
No, our traffic data tell us that that's not really effective. People don't follow paint. So like when we used to do things like this and like put a yellow center line down the middle, people just drive down the center line. So you ended up having to put like something down that center line, and then all of a sudden this doesn't make sense anymore. And it's difficult because on some streets like in River Road or Santa Clara, we've got a school and we like to have more of a neighborhood greenway setting for that. We have to put that center line in there just because of people's behavior and like where they choose to drive. And that means we can't do like advisory sidewalks or bike lanes and such, like there's some creative things we could do with curbless streets that we're not really able to do because of behavior right now. We'd like to experiment more with that, but it's risky. I mean, we don't have enough, it's just, we've got other things to do that follow our current standards. And so we're not experimenting a whole lot. Except with things like protected bikeways, where I think every time we've done one, we've done something a little different, and where, this is why we're asking a lot about Oakway, because we want to get that one right. And hopefully maybe that one will look different. Don't know. We can find out.
Charlie?
Willow, you can send us that policy?
I can send it.
You've done it, thank you.
I can. No, I haven't
Oh, you
yet. I
haven't.
can. Yes.
Thank you.
Charlie?
Charlie, you're up.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, actually, I was going to ask the same thing about getting a copy of the policy. And is the policy that you referred to, traffic for neighborhood greenways, traffic calming can be employed? I mean, is that all in the same set of policies, or is this scattered around?
Oh, this is an administrative rule signed back in 1994. I didn't know it existed. So the first time I tried to get diversion done, somebody pulled this out and said, okay, we're gonna have to do all of this. And I said, oh.
So in those administrative rules, so I'm sorry, Willa, did you say you were going to send that to us, or? Okay.
I'll send it. Yeah.
All right. And is that instruction about traffic calming in neighborhood greenways, or that's acceptable or useful?
That is in the neighborhood greenway policy. So we wrote that into the neighborhood traffic, or I'm sorry, into the traffic calming program. These are the standards that we're going to use. And so we had all of these different objective metrics, and then we said, and neighborhood greenways. And so, one of the ways to get to diversion might also be to rewrite that policy and say, and neighborhood greenways. But I think based on staff, and again, just internal disagreements, we're probably going to have thresholds for that. And that's where I think it gets a little less comfortable, because we don't know what those should be.
Okay, thank you.
McKenna?
Yeah, I'm curious if the city has any strong feelings for like temporary diversion, like using the temporary curbs with the flex post delineators, just as like a trial period at any point. Like if you're considering installing like a permanent installation, like if a temporary kind of trial period would be an appropriate consideration.
So we asked the city attorney's office, and they were attorneys, and they said, no, follow the policy. So we shouldn't have asked that question. The reason that we've got rubber diverters out at 19th and Alder is that technically that's a pilot. Don't ask me how long those have been out there, but we shouldn't have done that.
I'm glad you did.
Yeah, they're great.
Well, actually, no, that one, because there already was diversion there was a big curb extension. We sort of felt that followed, that diversion was already there, so we just added to it. But most of the time, there's not going to be existing diversion that we're adding to. So, yeah, we'd love to do more temporary quick build stuff. It's just, we need to it's difficult. It's difficult for us to get to yes on some of that stuff. And we've been instructed to follow the policy that we have. Because all it takes is for one person to run into that, damage their car and sue us. For us to say, well, did we follow the policy? And if we did not, then we're paying money. And so we are, we're very afraid of that.
So where does an administrative rule come from? What?
The administration.
Trump or what?
Yeah, I think the city engineer signed that one. Yeah, we've just got these internal policies sort of sprinkled throughout every department. That, again, if I didn't know that that existed, I wouldn't have known to look for it, but another staff member knew that we had it, and so I know now, and so that's what we're expected to follow. So that makes it sound like, I don't know, they're everywhere. They might not be. There are a lot of them in public works, because every time we have to make a decision, we don't want to have to go like through council or something. And so we establish these rules for ourselves to follow, that should hold up to scrutiny, because the first question when somebody has an issue with something that we've done is, why did you do that? And if we can point back to a policy that says this is what we've been following, and in this policy, since it's 1994 or something, we say for 30 years we've been doing the same thing, then that tends to hold up better. But it's really about administrative process and being able to be more nimble in our projects. So we set internal rules for ourselves. And engineering might be an outlier there, because engineers are sort of given this judgment where we're not asking council to decide if this is the appropriate thing to do for a roadway most of the time. They're letting engineers be engineers and use their judgment. At least in Eugene, that's been happening.
But to change an administrative rule, the department heads could do that? Is that?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the city engineer could just say, okay, we're gonna open this up and change it. I think that's what we did with the traffic calming policy, which, by the way, also needs to be updated. So we get a lot of policies and administrative rules that are also not great, in addition to this one, that probably need to be changed.
Is there a location where those policies are compiled?
Not that I've found.
Yeah. Yeah, how do we, can I?
Well, we're kind of over time. I was just wondering, are there any diversions that fire trucks can drive right through, or don't, that don't have to screw up emergency response?
Yeah, I mean, potentially they can go through. I've seen garbage trucks go through the one on 19th at Alder. Those big green bollards in the middle, they just bend over when garbage trucks drive over. I don't know why fire engine couldn't do that. Although when I did a ride along with fire, they did not know that those were flexible. And so I said, no, those are flexible for you guys. But so that is gonna get worked into their training so that they know they can drive on them now.
I just have one comment. I like the idea of diverters. I think it's a nice traffic calming element. I would think that like different neighborhood groups would be a great place to talk to folks within those areas to see if like they want to turn their street basically into a cul-de-sac. And it just doesn't sound like it's the public like issue of getting the public on board or the city on board to add these diverters, but it's more of an admin issue for this.
Well, somebody would have to pay for it. And so just like traffic calming, our list of traffic calming requests is this long, and we can afford to do like 2 or 3 of those a year. I would imagine that diversion would be a pretty similar thing.
Yeah.
Where we would have to start to prioritize things based on certain criteria, and that's why the policy should be inclusive of all of that. And this is why it's difficult, because once it becomes a program, we would need to fund it. And so currently there's no funding for that. And then we would have to decide under what situations they would be appropriate.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that traffic calming and diverters are not in the same program.
Not currently.
Okay. And for example, like those intersections that have those like tiny roundabouts in some of the local streets, would that be considered a diverter or a roundabout? Yes.
It's not a diverter.
Yeah.
That's traffic calming.
Oh, that's traffic calming.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Kind of over time. Josh, did you have something you need to get in or?
Yeah, but it's not even a question, it's just that we maybe should. I'd love to hear more about all the policies that hamper us doing things. Just generally, this
I
seems
had a
like
lot of
this
thought
should
to
be,
hearing you guys talk about like Oakway today, and I'm like,
it just seems
that's really
relevant.
hard to do.
That's all, it just seems like that could be an entire, like,
Yeah.
instead of this, because we don't really have time, like, that could be an entire topic for an entire day of ATC.
Yeah.
Like. And it would make us also much more informed
Yes.
of when we have ideas as to like. I mean, sometimes we're just like, hey, you should do this, and you're like, yeah, actually, I'd love to, but there's always a million reasons.
You know what I think would help with that, and I'm sorry, we're taking time, but just, we've been meaning to debrief projects. And so, one of the things that's popular is when we get down to the project, people say, oh, here's everything you did wrong. And what they don't know is why we made the design decisions that we made. And we might know that this isn't optimal. But this is what we could agree to for X reasons, and nobody else knows what those reasons
Yeah,
are.
yeah.
And so we would like to be able to come to groups like this and debrief projects and say, this is what we did, this is why we did it, we know how it's working, we're keeping an eye on it. So that would be really informative, and we should just, Willow, just maybe we tend to do that on an agenda every now and then. And just debrief a project and kind of say, this is what happened, and you guys can go out and ride it and come in with questions, and we'll say, okay, here's the deal.
We should do that with the Irving River Road intersection.
That would be a good one. Yep.
This will dovetail really nicely into our
Yes,
next
doesn't
agenda
it?
item anyway.
Okay, thank you, Reed.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Reed.
Thank
Have some popcorn.
you, Reed.
Okay, so project tracking, and I think Josh, you're the kind of,
Yeah, hopefully, okay, cool. So, and you got them both? Okay.
I've got
great.
both of them. Let me
Perfect.
know if there's one you want.
No, this is fine. So there are a couple different things, and I think what we were just started. The idea was, it's twofold. We're just discussing how we keep track of ATC's project, progress and even know what's happened, especially as like new members. And I noticed that actually Sue had started doing that in this spreadsheet that I wasn't aware of its existence. And then I found it and I was like, oh, this is actually great, except some people with some fancy spreadsheet skills, I might be volunteering myself, could probably make this better. Like all those letters could be linked to directly. So if you wanted to actually find them, you could actually read them. And I thought maybe we could try and get a group together to look at some things like that. And also like maybe color coded by topic or something. So it'd be easier to use. But there's also kind of an idea of a request to staff to also like engage with this, that the staff sides of the column are actually potentially filled out by Willow or something. As it's theoretically like things that are happening anyway. And so it's just like more, we have a central kind of clearinghouse where we are communicating back and forth. We've sent this letter, what happened with it? But I had this other idea, I think, which is related. And this was more of a sample, which was just more of like a dashboard. These are just, these are my ideas. They could be, this is why it's a sample and it's not on our drive. That there's kind of broader topics that we talk about a lot, and that are on meeting agendas. And we could have kind of a like dashboard where our priorities lie, where the most recent thing that's been discussed could be linked to in that category. And also our staff could like prepare us, like for example, with the parking, I had the parking counts on Alder, instead of having to like go dig through an email, like I have a dashboard that's just like, oh, this is a thing I could do. And also like we were just talking about with Reeves like 2 seconds ago, it'd be the kind of thing that's on like a dashboard. It'd be like, oh, we were supposed to find like these policies for you or something, you know, after we just had this conversation, it could be right there in like a central clearinghouse. So I was just trying to think of some way, but I was thinking that also, there's a potential way we could include that on the spreadsheet Sue already made. But just the idea that we have like a central sheet that we all can find stuff on, that also staff uses as well, so that we don't just kind of dig through old agendas, but we like have an active conversation going. that's basically my suggestion. I thought would like help us all. Just be more organized and remember when we did things and when we
Mhm.
talked about things. And that's all I wanted to say at the beginning of the conversation.
Yeah, I would just say, I think it is two different things, because the thing that I've kept up, it's literally the things we have actually taken, voted on and taken action on. It doesn't cover any of the stuff we've just discussed or had feelings about or kind of, and I don't really think it should be buddied up with all that kind of stuff, but it would be helpful to track some of that stuff that we heard from Reed on such and such a date about this issue or whatever. But I don't think it would be helpful to have that all on the same thing. It's a list of our actual actions. And yeah, I'd say, hell, I'm just about off the ATC, so I'm not gonna tell you what to do, but,
I don't have strong
So, yeah.
feelings. I think they're both really important.
yeah,
Ah.
I think so too.
Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, I mean, this was a mock-up like that, though, there's only like 2 links online, and
So
we should thank Sue, and we should, maybe anyone wants to volunteer to help, like, link to the things that exist, but there's also.
I can probably do it.
Hmm.
It's a good idea, I hadn't thought of it.
Big thank you to both of you. We've had a few emails back and forth with a cluster of us here. Excuse me. And as Sue pointed out, I don't know my status with the ATC starting in January yet. I'll know that soon, but it seems like it'd be really good if we had a person that was willing to step up and say, hey, I'm gonna bring this to the next meeting, and maybe quarterly or something. It was just a standing agenda item, and so we went back and tracked that. And if we all said, oh, yeah, that's a good idea, but then nobody's name is associated with it, then it's real easy to just have it go into the ether space.
voting for an archivist would be nice.
Charlotte had already mentioned in an email that we make sure that this is involved in like briefing new members, so they have some
Yes.
history, and I thought that was a great idea, because most of us show up here and we're like, so what does the ATC actually do? It sounds fun. Yeah, that could be a great.
So where do you want to go with this? I mean, do you want people to, do you want to just work from this, or do you want to try to have some people refine it, think about it, or what, I mean, what would you like to see happen?
That was directly me.
You are every.
Exactly, I was hoping other people might have thoughts, but if. It seems like. I think that most people feel like these might be 2 separate things, so that's cool. So we just need a few people to maybe help make Sue's spreadsheet better, because it already does what it does, it just could be fancier. I'm willing to do some of that, you're willing to do the linking part, so that's cool. So that's all. So I think more the dashboard one, I guess, is, well, there's a couple things. First of all, there's like kind of some soft commitment from staff to actually engage with the staff side of of both, really of both future spreadsheets, but I guess in the more immediate, the one that already exists, Sue's one. And then the one I'm trying to create, just like, I don't know if anyone wants to be involved with a small team, or if we should bring this to a future meeting where we kind of figure out what the major categories should be. I guess is the question.
I do wonder if the sidewalk committee is kind of sunsetted a little bit. It might make sense to bring this to that.
Could be a quick project.
It could be a quick
Yeah.
project to work on where we decide what the major categories are and kind of how this dashboard would function and how we'll use it. Lucy?
Thanks for creating this, Josh. I think it's a great start. I think that, I was a little confused by the staff upcoming item area, just 'cause there's some question marks in there, but then I had a thought. Related but not related, if there was a central place for staff to link things that the ATC could take action on, like something like the counts, because I'm seeing things that we could take action on here, like the survey.
Yeah.
Just so it's like top of mind, or a way for staff to communicate to the ATC in addition to the email, because y'all do a great job with sending those out. but they can get lost.
Mhm.
I do think that there is an opportunity to nominate like one person with maybe a backup to keep this up to date and then educate and train everyone on how to like add items to it. I just think, I'm just not sure if anyone's up for that task. So I'm just, yeah, I think it could be beneficial if like the vision was fleshed out a little bit more. So that's all I have. So.
I mean, I made this mock up in like 15 minutes, so. I'm not, like,
From the staff side of things, I'm happy to engage with the document. I do think that getting into a space beyond email would be helpful for everyone on the committee so that you don't have to go searching through inboxes for stuff. Josh, do you want to work together on like, would you be open to sort of working further on the dashboard? and-
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, this was,
Okay.
again, this was a concept, because
Yeah.
we had an email thread going, and they were like, Josh, what are you talking about? And I was, here's a visual.
Well, I think it's a good idea, which is basically anyone on ATC could just go to this thing
Yeah.
and it would be like, here's the survey, here's the parking
Yeah.
tracks, like, here's that stuff that's active right now for you to engage with. Here's a volunteer form for the Bright Parade or whatever it is, right? It's like, here's all the things. I think that would be really helpful
Yeah.
for members of the ATC, especially our new members who will be, bringing on. So, let's connect and work on
Yeah.
it more. Okay, cool. Yay.
Thank you.
That's a good idea. I like that idea. We're running a little bit short on time, but I have an ATC recruitment and co-chairs agenda item on here. And it says confirm who is stepping off and discuss co-chairs. So Sue is terming off of the ATC. She's done her 4-year service. So cannot continue as co-chair, which means we have an opening for co-chair. And then Lucy, are you staying?
I'm staying on the ATC, yes.
Staying on the ATC, remaining as co-chair.
I'm happy to stay on as co-chair. I'm also willing to, if anyone else feels strongly about being a chair,
Okay,
happy to, relinquish that. Is that the right word?
yeah.
Delegate. Oh.
Okay. I think what I had said in the email was that if you're interested in being co-chair, now would be a good time to just be like, I am maybe curious about that. So that we sort of have an idea, and then at our next meeting, the December meeting, we'll vote on the new co-chair. So. Oh, here, I can stop sharing screen too, so that our online people can see us better, and we can see them. If you are interested in being co-chair, maybe like raise your hand or make yourself known, or use your raise hand feature if you're online.
I offered.
There we
You know,
go,
have a
Josh.
strong feeling if there's other people who want to do it, but yeah.
Right, I don't think anyone is coming in hot on wanting to be co-chair.
I
So
know ideas about organizing.
Right, yeah, I think yeah, and
Mary encouraged me to offer, actually, and I was like, okay,
Nice.
thanks.
anybody else on the committee who's interested in being co-chair, because I think we can like sort of engage in a discussion about who feels like they have time, who feels like they fit. Charlie, you had mentioned to me in email. Yeah, raised.
Yeah, I potentially, I would be very interested. My only obstacle, I may actually, there may be a 2 months next year when I'm not here. And so I wasn't sure it would necessarily be the best year for me to do that if I already know that I'm gonna, miss 2 to 3 meetings off the bat.
Gotcha.
But if it is a co-chair thing and I'm, the other chair can handle those meetings, then I'm potentially interested, but I do see that as an obstacle for me.
Okay, great. Okay, anybody else on the committee who's interested in the co-chair position?
Is anybody else terming off this year?
We actually have quite a
Or
few
just
people.
stepping down?
Let's see. We will do like a more formal, like goodbye, we'll miss you thing at the December meeting. But the other person who's terming off and cannot continue is Mary. So Mary and Sue are like veteran ATC members who have been here for 4 years. And they're both terming off. And then there's a handful of people who are also stepping off the committee due to, just like time constraints. So. Yeah,
Well, I know that there was a practice that we adopted at one time, and I don't know if it's continuing or not. Encouraging people who are on the committee but terming off to come to the January meeting. And sharing the reflection about their experience being on the ATC, so
Right.
the people who are incoming can hear it.
I love that idea. I feel like since I've been in this position, usually what we've done is have people who are leaving the committee give remarks at the December meeting. But based on what you shared, the January meeting feels more appropriate because they can share with the new folks, but it does sort of require them to come to an additional meeting. So I do think it would kind of be up to the people who are stepping off the committee.
It may also depend on a lot of the new folks came to the December meeting.
A lot of the new folks came to the December meeting last year. I don't know if we'll be able. I was really on it with our recruitment timeline last year. I don't know if I'm actually
Alright, fair
gonna
enough.
have
Yeah.
like confirmed who the new members are in time for the December meeting this year. We're like a little bit behind on recruitment. Folks who are leading the committee, would you be open to coming to the January meeting?
I can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think what we could do is for the December meeting, folks who are leaving and can't come to the January meeting, you could sort of give some remarks and share your reflections,
Sure.
and then anyone who's available for the January meeting could come. That would be great. So we can kind of do that at the next meeting. But I like that idea. Okay. We have a BPAC liaison here, so do you want to share what BPAC's been up to?
I can share a little bit. So, okay, so BPAC is winding up the year, putting together their report on their work plan and what they did and didn't accomplish. Drew at City of Springfield Transportation Planner did get approval for the bicycle and pedestrian master plan. So he's gonna be working on that next year. And I don't know if they've hired someone yet, but they do have like a temporary transportation planner position with the City of Springfield that's gonna help Drew with that project and some other things. But my other update is that I actually moved to Eugene just recently. Not on the BPAC anymore, and I'm sad about that, but happy to be in Eugene, so yeah. I
Are
guess
you applying
next
for
year.
the ATC?
I don't think I have capacity for it, but I will be attending the meetings like as a member of the public, as the active transportation coordinator at the U of O, so I'll still be attending these meetings. But yeah, like outside, I guess the commitment to ATC in terms of like other stuff, I'm not sure I could do that, but I'm happy to be in Eugene, and then I'm sure BPAC will have someone else to report on what they're doing next
Cool.
year.
Great.
Thank you.
And then
Yeah.
Brad and Peter were sharing BPAC liaison, but one of you had to stop.
I did.
You had to stop. Okay, I couldn't remember. So Brad does need another person to join up to cover the BPAC meetings. They are every other month. Brad can do half of them, so it does not mean very many meetings. Is anyone available or interested in going to the other BPAC meeting?
I think you can also, it's hybrid, so you can.
Right, you don't have to go to Springfield.
Well, we're also gonna have some new members.
I was
to
gonna
try
say,
and
it'd be a
press
good
to
way for
find.
a member to sort of establish their presence, you know.
I mean, Peter was new and did it for a year,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, it would be a great opportunity for a new member. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Brad.
Why don't I just take it till the new folks get warmed up, and then I'll schmooze one of them into taking it halftime. How's that?
Okay, that sounds great.
Okay,
Brad will
That's
cover
not,
the rest
that's
of
not a
it.
really big gift that I gave because it's only a couple months, but you know, it once every 2 months, so no big deal. But
Sounds great. Thank you, Brad.
all
Brad will
right,
cover it for the
just
rest of it.
remind me, when is the next meeting? Because I think we missed one, if I'm not mistaken.
Wait, is it January?
I went to one a while back, and then
I
I'm
think it's
not sure
the
what.
month of February.
The December meeting, there is no December meeting.
Oh, wait, yeah, December.
Okay, next meeting is December. Brad, if you wanted to, I could connect you with Drew too, and Drew could kind of give you the exact details.
Okay, I know Drew. I can reach out to him and
Okay, yeah, just tap Drew and he can send you the stuff.
copy. Gotcha.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I know that we are actually 1 minute over time, but the last thing I wanted to say is that we have launched our engagement for 24th Avenue. And exploring, adding protected bike lanes, and on Monday, or on Tuesday, we launched our survey. Of 24th, so I'd really encourage you all to take the survey. This is a QR code. I've got a couple of them. If anyone wants to like scan that, you can do that. You can also find it on our website. And I'm gonna be posting it on our social media soon. It'll also be in the December in motion, so there will be some opportunities, but if you feel like you wanna take it now, there's a QR code that you could scan and get it loaded on your phone to when you have a minute.
Are these copies for us?
You can also take that if you want. That was my presentation for the Amazon Neighbors Association, so it might not be that helpful without the context. But you can look through it if you want to. Okay. I think that's what we got.
Okay. What's the time for the open house? Well, thank you.
Oh, yes, December 10th open house for the Amazon or for the 24th Avenue Protected Bikeway. We're having an open house on December 10th from 6 to 7 o'clock. I'm calling it open house, which isn't really right. It's more like a community meeting because it starts at 6 with a presentation. So it's not a drop-in style event. It really is more of a 6 to 7 o'clock event with a presentation and then a discussion. And where? At Roosevelt Middle School. Yes.
Can I add one thing?
Yes.
There's also great volunteer opportunities for bike-minded people happening at Shift right now, because they're doing their Bike for Kids drives, so like every Monday and Thursday evenings, if you have time for like 5 to 7 or something, they do volunteer nights. So just wanted to add that.
Thanks
to this group.
And I'll take it even if you're a lousy mechanic. Huh?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks for a great meeting.
Thank you.
Mostly stayed on that. Bye, everybody. Bye, online people. Thanks, Jerry. See you next month.